Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 18th day of October 2021. And now I want us to focus on an interesting topic because remember once upon a time there was Section 22 of the Elections Act that gave the qualifications for members of parliament and the members of county assemblies. They were required to have at least a degree, a university degree, starting the election of 2022. This is something that was, the amendment came in 2017 but delayed until 2022. But now the High Court has said that there was no public participation, and actually you cannot require all persons running for elective offices to have the same qualification because a governor and even a president requires a degree to contest. Wakili Danstan Omari was in court, and Wakili, good morning. And now this leaves us with no qualification for a member of parliament or for an MCA. What do you have to say about this vis-a-vis what the judge said, Justice Anthony Murima?
I and my team through Sheria Mtaani went to court to challenge that provision on the basis that it is not inclusive, it does not give everybody an equal opportunity, it differentiates the youth, it does not give those guys who have some constituencies have only 3 people who have degrees, and therefore Sheria Mtaani went to enforce that, and the judge has agreed that there should not be any academic qualification really. And some, if you remember, previously people could do the test of English and Kiswahili to represent the people. It is the choice of the Kenyans. It is not the academic competence that matters in providing leadership and oversight.
Well, Wakili, you just said that the judge has left it to just understanding English and Swahili. Is that your interpretation of what the judge specifically said? And secondly, you said that the judge has decided you don't require any academic qualification. Is that what he said, or he quashed that section because it lacked public participation?
The question is that in public participation, people need to be consulted and people need to agree. But the gist of the question is it fair? If you look at the population census of 2011, you'll find that in some constituencies, there are only 3 degree holders. How do you then decide who becomes the governor, who becomes the MCA, who becomes the Then you do not allow every Kenyan to participate. Number 2, the question of public participation, just to contextualize it with what you have been talking about, the Huduma number, the government seems to be ignoring Article 10 of the Constitution. Let everybody know that for any government project, for anything that involves the public, the question of asking the consent of the employer, who is the public, is no longer theoretical, it is no longer idealistic, it is compulsory. So let government capture that for anything they want to do, ask the Kenyans. If you want to put a PhD qualification for an MCA, consult the Kenyans. If you do not consult the Kenyans, the courts will protect the right of Kenyans to give their views on any issue. And most of the cases in court are being dismissed because of failure to comply with the condition of participation of the citizens.
And so, Wakili, because there will be an election on August 9th, 2022, so what will IEBC be looking for when they receive the aspirants who want to run for those MC and MP seats? And secondly, what can Parliament do or the people do between now and then if indeed any academic qualification is needed?
They need very fast to move to ensure that there is public participation and move to the court and convince the court that we have now done public participation. Number 2, if they do not want to go that line, then they'll have to develop new rules and new guidelines, excluding the question of degrees. There are other qualifications that they can push. 1, for example, one must be a Kenyan. 2, one must be over 28 or 18 years and above. Those are the requirements that are not contested. But on the question of the degree element, they must go to the citizens, they must come to my place in Nyamira and ask me, or go to Shadrack Wamboi at Sheria Mtaani and ask him, do you want people to contest with the degrees? Failure to that, any attempt to circumvent the provisions, the conditions the judge has put will be contempt of the court orders.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Wakili Danstan Omari. Of course, he was one of the lawyers representing Sheria Mtaani, and congratulations for that. But back here to the conversation, and Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, so now it means that the MCAs in Migori County and all the members of parliament do not necessarily require an academic qualification, because if that section is illegal, then there's no other provision that caters for that. Yet the Constitution provides that Parliament shall provide or pass a legislation that puts into consideration the academic qualification for a person to run for that position. What do we do from here?
Sam, I'm wondering when you would give me time to say these other things which I was suspending at your request. But talking about the issue of leadership, Sam, the reality is that leadership is something complex. It has very many facets that might need to be considered. There are people who, by nature, God gave them some innate ability just to lead others through some wisdom and insight and things like that. However, it is also important to note that that innate ability sometimes may not also really function very well in every circumstance, and therefore the so-called formal education and all other forms of training will expand and build one's capacity to be a better leader and also be able to operate in all the environments. And noting that environment has been constantly changing to the extent that even a few minutes ago, we are talking about a digital world, a one world brought together by technology. It therefore becomes imperative that whoever wants to lead the people should be able to understand all the dynamics of things that are happening in this world. Okay. And I think that is where the issue of the degree and the formal education at whatever level comes into effect. However, I am a very strong believer that all people should be given an equal chance. Now, going back to this equal chance, I think since independence, the government of Kenya and all of us as parents, whether we are in government or not, we have struggled also to take our children to school to certain levels. Some of them drop out at Form 4, Class 8 for whatever reasons, including lack of fees and all that. And some of them go towards the finish the degree, others acquire 2 or 3 like myself. And all these things are good. But when we come to this debate, I think we need to be very sober. And when my colleague lawyer over there, Omari, says that you may go to a constituency in Kenya today where there are only 3 degree holders, as somebody who has worked in a national university of Kenya, I want to defy this statement. And what hurts me most of the time, when leaders of all capacities are given a chance to say something that is also affecting and impacting on Kenyans, we sneak lies in between. And this is what I don't like in this country. It is true that, yes, there are places where there are fewer graduates, but the truth of the matter is that almost today in all our villages, you are likely to find more than 10 graduates. Notwithstanding, I think, like I may want to draw a parallel to something that happens in the university arena. There is a criterion of inviting students to join various degrees. The main one that we have is certain level of pass at Form 4. But if you go into the university rules, you will find that there are other parallel qualifications that somebody should have for them to get to the university education. I was only using that as an example.
Okay.
What I think about
Dr. Pamela,
it is not bad to have the degree holders go for MCAs or MPs. However, we should also come up with other routes through which other people who are qualified but do not have these degrees can also still participate in leadership. The other thing is that at higher levels, for example, when we are looking at somebody like a president, we are looking at somebody like a governor, then I think what that lawyer said, which I may want to buy in, is that we cannot have one flat rate. Depending on the scope and the responsibility of the said leaders, I think like they do in the formal employment or even for government positions, there should be varied requirements.
Okay.
So that we don't just say a degree, a blanket for everyone.
All right, Dr. Pamela, I hear you.
Yes.
Just only because you need to circulate the question here. You question Wakili's assertion that there are some areas with just 3 degree holders. His wording may be wrong, but according to the statistics of the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, a constituency like a sub-county like Balambala in Garissa County in 2019 had 18 degree holders. 13 of them were men, 5 were women. Kibish in Turkana, 37 degrees, 28 were men, 9 were women. Tarbaj in Wajir, 52 degrees, 38 were men, and 14 were women. This is just some of the areas that have the lowest number of university degrees. But across the country, you have about 1.25 million university degree holders. That's according to the census of 2019. Mid-level colleges and TVETs, you have 2.6 million, and 8.8 million are people that finished their education at the secondary level, and 18 million finished at a primary level. And Honorable Mboi, as you reflect on this, what then should be the minimum qualification for an MCO or an MP, because the Constitution provides that Parliament shall make that legislation?
I support what Parliament passed even before I was in the House, because it was passed in 2012 before the election of 2013 when I came in. And it was postponed, and again it was postponed for the election of 2017. Now I'm seeing again it's being pushed again forward, looking like the country is going to have leaders elected who do not qualify academically. And the reality is that even to get a job, even to work in this studio, you have to have certain basic qualifications. Education is key. We've told our children all over from the time we started, from the time we got independence, that education is a key to the future. And now we are saying that to be a leader, you don't need certain basic education. I think a degree is a very basic minimum qualification to be MCA and to be MP. And I'll qualify the reasons. First and foremost, you know, their qualifications must follow the job. There are 3 critical jobs that these people do. One is to represent. How do you represent doctors, engineers, lawyers, and you haven't been to school? And some of the issues that they will bring to your table for you to address will be issues that concern them. So you must have a certain basic qualification to be able to represent properly. The second responsibility you have is oversight. You're oversighting the national government or oversighting the county government. The ministers and the CECs are degree holders. They are graduates, some of them with PhDs. And they are doing things that you need to be able to understand so that you can be able to decipher and be able to sort them out. So clearly, if you send people who have not been to school to sit in the assembly, they cannot be able to aggressively oversight the government. And thirdly and finally, the other job is legislation, making laws. How do you make laws if you yourself are illiterate? How do you make laws and you are an illiterate? And that's why we elect people, and 10 years down the road, someone has never uttered a word in Parliament. Somebody has never uttered a word in the county assembly. Because when laws come there, they cannot understand them. They cannot interpret them. They cannot be able to give a contribution. So I think even Kenyans also need to understand that for you to be able to elect people, look at their capacity. Don't look at likability, because sometimes we just like someone. He's a very good orator in funerals, so we want to elect him. That's not the qualification. Look at the job for which you want him to go and do.
Because now you sit in Parliament, do you think persons who hold degrees are better debaters, better lawmakers, better representatives over those that don't have degrees in Parliament?
I think that's a fact. That one is a fact, because look at it this way. I will tell you, if you look at the voluminous laws that sometimes we pass, for you to go through that, you really have to have time, and you really have to be literate enough to be able to read all that and to be able to understand it so that you can be able to contribute. You will listen to Parliament, and sometimes people stand up and talk totally irrelevant things, totally unrelated to to what is on the floor. And I'm sure Kenyans have seen that. So we are saying that we need to have basic education, and basic education now for me is just a degree, so that you're able to be able to understand and to be able to interpret and to be able to contribute effectively.
And wouldn't that be exclusivist, if that is English, to say that only 1.25 million Kenyans can run for those offices?
And Sam, then let me ask you, our constitution, which we passed in 2010, says that for you to be president, you have to have a degree. For you to be governor, you have to have a degree. Why is there double standards? Why is a senator who is a member of parliament not expected to have a degree, yet the governor has a degree? Why is a member of parliament not expected to have a degree, yet the governor should have a degree?
What I'm saying is,
I think it's not
imagine
exclusive.
we're talking about the leadership of this country. How many MCAs do we have? About 2,200, if I'm not mistaken, if I to include the nominated ones. Then you have 47 governors, some 47 senators, 47 deputy governors, a president and a deputy, members of parliament, about 400 and something, including the senators. So you have a club of about, should I say, 3,000. You leave that to just people that have gotten a university degree? Don't you find that exclusivist? Because Justice Ngai is also saying that it is not fair to require the president's qualification to be the same as MCA's qualification.
So why is it that the governor's qualification should not be the same as the senators? You know, I think that at the end of the day, for me, I think education is important. We spend a lot of money in fact, our biggest part of our budget in this country goes to education. And what is the purpose? Because we want to have an educated population. And then here we are saying that the leaders of this population are okay if they are not educated, but the population, the members of the public have to themselves be educated. I think it's not exclusive. I think people have been given opportunities. Some remember I've said this law was passed in 2012. And we've had the first election of 2013, it was deferred. It was again brought in 2017, it was deferred again. Every time it keeps being postponed, people have been given opportunity to read. Who has been blocked from going to school and get a degree?
Honorable Speaker, you sit in an assembly where you deal with the MCAs. Those, what's the proportion of those that have degrees and those that don't? And do you see better quality in those with degrees versus those that don't, that would make a case for this qualification?
Well, having a degree would be desirable. It's a good thing. And I think it is what we should aspire, that eventually we can have almost every other leader who is elected having a degree. But apart from that, I would want to say that we also need to be practical as Kenyans. Kenya is an extremely unequal society. The statistics you have just read there, you can't ignore them. That in some of the counties, unlike maybe Kathiani, where Honorable Mbui comes from, where we have a lot of degree holders, unlike from Nyeri County, where I come from, where some of us have all the way up to 4 degrees, some of the counties have people who do not actually hold degrees as much as possible. And if you look at some of the statistics you have given there, those people who you have mentioned there, like where you have said they have about 18 people with degrees, I think Balabala you have talked of 18 or 15. If you look at the 15, they are most likely not domiciled in Balabala. They are here in the city, and they probably left that area a long time ago. And so if you want to go and look for a local representation, that is an MCA, member of county assembly, this is a person who represents people at the local level. This is a person who needs to be there with those people.
Right.
I mean, how do you now even interest these 18 people who are in the city here to go back to Balabala and maybe vie for these positions? So let's be practical. I think as where we are now as a country, we have not attained that level. Some places have, but some of the other places have not attained that level of education levels. What I think we need to do is to look at the issue of literacy. We need to have a way of assessing literacy so that those people who may be illiterate can be stopped from, going for these positions.
With illiterate, you mean not able to read and write?
If you can be able to read, if you can be able to communicate, if you cannot be able to write, then you would have a challenge making laws. You'd have a challenge representing people. You would have a challenge sitting in a formal arrangement where you are supposed to be making certain contributions. But my assessment as of now is that, for example, like the person whom I think is my best member of county assembly, who doesn't miss the sittings, who contributes most, whom I will always have to give an opportunity to say something in the assembly, because they are there and they make very, very good contribution. They are not a degree holder. So if you tell me that you want to
What's their qualification?
I mean, this would be at a diploma level.
Okay.
And of course, they are all struggling as we are talking to acquire the degree, because it's now a requirement for paper for the documentation purposes.
Okay.
But the degree does not in any way make you a better politician or a better legislature just because you have it. And I would want to say this, and the public need to understand, they don't need to look at this with the eyes of the sitting members of county assembly, of members of parliament. They need to look at this even as themselves, because you need to ask yourself, I'm not a degree holder, and yet at some point I would want to aspire to be to represent people.
Allow me to stop you there, because I need to listen to the DG who worked at the county and was the subject of oversighting. What is the name? Senator Kipchumba Murkomen of Elgeyo Marakwet has proposed an amendment to the Act to say that a person is qualified for election as MCA or MP if that person is able to read and write in the English or Kiswahili language, or in the case of a person who is deaf or hard of hearing, is literate in the Kenya Sign Language. Is that a good basis to start from? And where do we go now, because we don't have any qualification or minimum qualification academically for people that want to be MCAs or even MPs?
Yeah. I think there's what we need to look at, and this is what we really need to be debating, is what are the functions of these offices that we are speaking about? And that's where we need to start. What is it that you would need to do your job? And I think one thing we have failed to differentiate is between capacity and education. I think what you need is capacity to be able to do the job. And capacity can come in many other ways. You can build the capacity through trainings. There's many other forms of education apart from getting a formal university or college degree. So as long as you're able to have that capacity to do the job, then you should be eligible to run. Another thing that is extremely important, especially to us in UDA, and Honorable Bai, I'm a member of UDA.
You registered yourself?
I registered myself legally, and I can confirm that I'm a member of UDA, and it didn't come from an M-Pesa shop. So in UDA, one of our key pillars is inclusivity. And if you look at the statistics I'm seeing up on your screen, you know, one of the qualifications to run for public office, elective public office, is you have to be 18 and above. Now, which 18-year-old person has a degree? That's a question we need to answer ourselves. So you're already locking out people between 18 and 22, because it takes 4 years to get a college degree. Number two, half of our population is above 18, which means that they can vote and they should be able to run for elective office. That's almost 20 million people, 25 million people. Now here you're saying out of those 25 million people, only 1.25 can run. I think it's discriminative. So I think we really need to look at inclusivity, one, and number two, let's differentiate between capacity and education. I'm a proponent of education, and I think education is very important. But again, you shouldn't just get educated for the sake of getting educated, which is another problem we have in this country.
When you served at the county,
we train for hope instead of training to place. We need to find out what are the opportunities, and then we train people for those opportunities.
So when you served at the county and you were interacting with the MCAs of Nairobi County, was there any variance, better quality in terms of debating or even oversighting because of degrees or whatever?
Well, I wouldn't say because of degrees. We're 127 members of county assembly. Of course, you're going to have diversity in that large group of people. There's people who are more qualified than others. There's people who have better capacity than others. There's people who are in it for the right reasons, and some who are in it just because they managed to get an opportunity and didn't really care about what they're doing. So when you have that many people, there's a lot of diversity in it. But at never one point was I able to make a correlation between capacity of somebody to do their job and education. Now, Honorable Mbui spoke about you can't be leading lawyers and doctors if you are not educated. I think that's why we have institutions. And all these organizations we are speaking about in government are institutions. So you don't need to be jack of all trades to be able to do your job. That's why you employ people, and that's why we employ CECs who have degrees, and that's why we employ directors and
That's not a requirement.
whatever who have degrees. It's a requirement.
Really?
Yes, it's a requirement.
For CECs to have degrees?
Correct.
Based on what law?
County Governments Act.
Whoa, okay. Because for CSCs, I don't think it's a requirement to have a degree.
I think it is as well.
We'll confirm that.
Just
but
confirm it.
I want us to...
Just confirm it, but I think you do.
We will confirm that, but I want us to make
I think it is
transition.
not a requirement for the CSs to have degrees. It is a requirement for county executive committee members to have
CSs, yeah.
degrees.
Yes.
It is a requirement for the county chief officers to have a master's degree.
That's according to the County Government Act.
Yes.
Yes.
So CECs and CEOs are required to have at least a
No,
degree.
CEOs need to be more qualified than
Yes,
CECs.
but for CSs, they don't require a degree.
No.
No.
What is that? I mean, isn't that interesting?
Is it very interesting?
All right.
They should all have to have.
I want us to transition
Maybe the
by...
parliament should
Some-
legislate on that.
Yes,
Sam, may I say something before you transit, please?
yes, Dr. Pamela, go ahead.
You know, Sam, I've listened to a lot of semantics from the discussion of my fellow leaders. When the former the Deputy Governor of Nairobi is saying that we separate capacity and education, I'm wondering, because as one who has worked in the education sector in this country, I think what we are calling education is just a method of capacity building in people. And so even what you think somebody gained through some experience, that is learning, and that is some form of education. So when we are talking about these issues, what is there in Kenya is that we are not actually, even as we sit here, providing leadership. The actual truth is that there is a lot of discrepancies that need to be synchronized. For example, what the speaker has just mentioned. Why would you have MCAs who have no degree at all, and then you say CECs have the degree, and yet the jobs of these people are intertwined, such that when these degree holders are proposing, this is the policy, this is what we want to implement in the Ministry of, for example, in the water department, then the representatives who do not understand that would actually oppose it or throw it away or insist on something that cannot just practically work. What I'm saying is, I want to buy from Honorable Mbuis. There is a need to acknowledge that Kenyans have struggled through education all these years so that we have a better understanding and we have capacity. So when it comes to leadership, even those leaders should be the kind of leaders that we are telling our children, we want you to grow up and be like so-and-so, leader so-and-so. But when we only say somebody has a capacity to speak because they can pick a microphone and abuse other leaders in front of the children, these are some of the tragedies that we have ended up with.
Okay.
And I
Pamela
think
is not very
this
happy
is something
today.
that we need to start soberly
All right.
and agree that we have to get people who understand the job, because the job does not stop at just speaking in those funerals or in those public gatherings in the village. It now translates to a technical area of legislation and interpreting legislation to the public. I think
all right.
we need to look at this thing.
Okay, all right. Well noted, Dr. Pamela, but I'm just wondering, between those with degrees and those without, who has more insults or better insults? Let us transition to talk about the messaging.
I just wanted to read something
No,
in the
just hold on.
Constitution.
The
Article
messaging,
38 of the
messaging,
Constitution of Kenya.
Article 38 of the Constitution
on the
says?
issue of political rights. Every adult citizen, that is 3, every adult citizen has the right without unreasonable restrictions to be registered as a voter, to vote by secret ballot in any elections or referendum, and to be a candidate for public office or office within a political party of which the citizen is a member, and if elected, to hold office. And the key word here is without unreasonable restrictions.
Unreasonable restrictions,
so
okay.
if for example, you introduce the issue of the degree to a person, for example, who is in Balabala, as you have mentioned, this would definitely be unreasonable restrictions, because it means the population there cannot contest for these positions.
Okay.
Yeah, and having said that, I think Pamela today seems to be a bit I don't know what is happening down there in Meru, Pamela. I think
No.
she needs to relax a bit.
There is nothing happening in Meru,
This is my
Mr.
friend.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you
Dr.
are my
Pamela,
friend,
it's
but
okay.
today,
Dr. Pam.
Mr. Speaker, you are my friend. You are my friend, but today you are saying that the educated people from Balabala are in Nairobi. What are they doing in Nairobi? They should go back and serve their people.
Wow.
This idea of drawing all the educated people to Nairobi is also not fair for this country.
Okay,
We give our
15 of them.
university students skills so that they can go back to the village and bring up those villages.
All
so
right.
that is also needs to be corrected.
All right,
Let us
Dr.
not use it
Pamela.
as an excuse, please.
All right, Dr. Pamela, can we now move on to the conversation about the campaign messaging that you're seeing on the 2022 campaign trail? And I want us to begin by listening to some leaders, Raila Odinga, then DP Ruto, on what they've been saying on the campaign trails, then you can have a conversation.
Tunaleta ile inaitwa kimombo social protection program. Kila jamii ambayo hawana mapato watakuwa wanapata shilingi 6,000 kila mwezi kutoka kwa serikali. Hiyo ni ahadi. Hiyo ni ahadi. Ahadi ni nini? Ahadi ni nini?
Hawa mahasla hawataki handout. Usiwaambie ati watawapatia shilingi 200. Hata yule anafanya kwa mjengo halipwi 200, analipwa 500. So wewe wachana na handout. Hawa vijana wanataka ajira.
Kama wewe ni mkweli na wewe si maskini, si ukitembea wapatie hata 1,000 angalau. Wakingoja hiyo 6 hiyo. Na hiyo kusema atapeana milioni 6,000 kwa kila kijana ni ndoto ya mchana kuwahadaa vijana.
All right, you've had it for yourself. Let's look at page 14 of the Daily Nation. There's an interesting cartoon there that you see. Is it called cartoon? Election promises being carried aboard what looks like a trash vehicle. And you will see there's an announcer there saying jobs, water, roads, and many others. And there's a shoe attached to the rear tire. Election promises. You can see that a lot of torn stuff and wasted. So is this what you're just going through now? Honorable Mbui, when you listen to that promise, of course, my suspicion is that when DP Ruto says 200 shillings, he has taken 6,000 shillings divided by 30 and made it 200 shillings per day. So when you look at these promises, and I'm also wondering the One Kenya Alliance strategy or the promise by Kalonzo Musyoka, are they taking us closer to realizing the Kenyan vision or the Kenyan dream? Or is it just something to make us charged to vote a certain way, then life continues?
You know, Sam, every time there's an election, a lot of these leaders have what we call a manifesto. And a manifesto is a wish list of the things they would love to be able to achieve within the 5 years if they assume office. Some of them are really ridiculous and some are obviously logical and achievable. And many times the manifesto is based on the problems that you see people having. If people seem to be unemployed and to be poor like Kenya, chances are that people will try and give a directive or give an indication that they will push them out of poverty. I think the biggest lie, in my opinion, is the one that being brought in by these the so-called hustler. The narrative that we are going to bring some kind of support to everyone at the bottom. And I think it's not very far different from maybe what the Right Honorable Raila Amolo said, because he will give these people something out of social protection, like the way the old people are being given some money, but those ones that have not yet gotten employed. But here, when you look at the issue of the one of uplifting, all the small businesses, border borders, I don't know, mamambogas, clearly some, I find that totally unachievable, because in the first place, you cannot lift someone's business with little money. It has to be maybe 100,000, 200,000, and it has to be a lot more money injected, because right now we have what we call the Uwezo Fund. We have Women Enterprise Fund, we have the Youth Fund. All these funds are already on the ground. And all these funds are being used to support these small businesses. But somehow the impact hasn't been great. But it's a lot of money that goes into these funds. But when you listen to the narrative now being brought by the Hustler Nation, we are going to give 100 million per constituency. Already that money is being given through these other funds. What new thing will happen? So I think it's just campaign promises are ways by which you can convince the voting masses that you are going to do better than others. And sometimes it's also a tragedy when people who are sitting in office, you've been deputy president from 2013, and Mama Mbogas were there, Boda Bodas were there, you didn't help them. 2017, you are re-elected again, you haven't done anything. Now you tell them, when I come in 2022 is when I will now know your problems. I think most of them are lies. Okay. Now, our team, the OKA team, understands one thing, that we cannot live on handouts, we cannot live on giving people, because ask not, like John F.K. said, ask not what your country will do for you, but what you can do for your country. Remember, the government doesn't have its own money. It's our taxpayers' money that the government uses.
But does the voter understand that language?
That's what the voters, that's what we are telling voters. We are telling voters that the government doesn't have more money than you. The government's money is the money you give the government. So if you're going to give the government 100 shillings, how will the government give you $1 million? It doesn't work that way. So the reality is that these are lies that are being perpetuated by people who want to assume office. And unfortunately, my biggest fear is when you lie too much and you assume office. And 1 year down the road, these citizens will be asking, where is that money you told us as Boda Boda you lifters and Mama Mbogas? And there will be a revolution, and that's what we are fearing. So, here we are telling Kenyans, we allow you to do 24 hours, do your businesses, run your affairs. We'll give you a conducive environment. We'll ensure that we fight corruption, because we as leaders, we know that the biggest problem this country has is corruption. Okay. And then we give you an opportunity to grow yourselves and your businesses. All right,
Mboi, I read somewhere someone saying that nipe 6,000 sahi nitakurudishia next year ikikuja. But Honorable Mweke, so your team has been heavy on the promise to the people you call the Hustler Nation or the Hustler movement, or the young people. Have you eventually found the route towards that, especially when you come to say lifting the businesses from the bottom going up? Have you found the solution?
Absolutely. First of all, Sam, I'm extremely excited to be having this conversation because in the last 3 years, the Deputy President has been speaking about empowerment of the ordinary citizen, while other people were thinking about constitutional reform, changing the constitution to give themselves jobs of prime ministers and deputy prime ministers. So I'm so happy to see the Right Honorable Raila Odinga finally speaking about the economy and finally speaking about people. Bottom-up economics it's an economic ideology. We have 4 factors of production for those who understand economics. There is labor, there is land, there is capital, and there is entrepreneurship. Our entrepreneurship in this country, the code word, jina la mtaa, the slang for entrepreneurship is the hustler. We have 3 things that work for us in this country. We have the labor, we have the entrepreneurship spirit, and we have the land. Why we don't grow is because of lack of access to capital. Yeah. Now, Honorable Mbui has spoken about 100, 200,000 shillings to run a business. That's at the top of the pyramid. We're talking about the bottom of the pyramid. These guys need 1,000 bob. They need 2,000 bob. We did a women empowerment program a month ago in Kitui with the Deputy President, where these women groups contribute 4,000 shillings a month, right? And that money, with their merry-go-rounds and their goat rearing and their table banking, has educated their children. 4,000 shillings a month. And we were able to empower them with the little resources we had at 20,000 shillings a women group. You have given them 5 months of capital. That is what empowerment is about.
When was that?
This was on September 24th, right? That's what empowerment is about. And
so far, how is it? So 20,000 per group of how many women?
They were ranging between 10 and 15. But you see, the money is not going to individuals like Mr. Raila Odinga is saying. This is going into businesses. This is just ensuring that, listen, these people, number one, who are jobless, if we give them capital, we have the other three factors of production to make them productive. That's one.
No, I just want to understand this example use of women
Yes.
who are
Go ahead,
rearing
I'll
goats or
explain it to you.
something. So 20,000 shillings per group of between 10 and 15 women.
Yes.
That was on September 24th, you said.
Correct.
So what are the projections?
The projections right now with their 4,000 shillings and their table banking, they're able to triple their 4,000 shillings every 3 months because they lend to each other, they go do their own businesses, and then they give each other money every month.
So this 20,000 was to add on to
Correct.
the revolving fund.
Correct.
Of
It was an empowerment to the revolving fund.
Okay.
So just giving an example of you don't need 200,000 shillings. That's at the top. That's trickle down that these other people are
All right,
talking about.
I hear you.
But let me explain bottom up because it's very misunderstood.
DJ, allow me.
And you asked me a question that I want to.
Just hold on. Just hold on.
Able to explain.
No.
Dr. Pamela, what is it?
Yeah. Give me a chance to explain. You've given
Just hold on.
everybody else
Just
a
hold on,
chance.
DJ
Give me a
Mweke.
chance to explain
I want to hear
bottom up economics.
Just hold on. I'll hear from
I've explained 25%.
DJ Mweke.
Can I have a
I need to
share
hear
in this
from
discussion?
Speaker Kagusha here.
Yeah.
It's okay, Dr. Pamela.
But we've
Speaker,
not explained our
I'll get back
economic model.
to you if you have time. Speaker Kagusha, I'm just wondering, because you've been listening to this, I don't know what persuades you now, if you're ready to make it clear to the people. But when you look at all these, there'll be so many promises, but Kenyan challenge, even if you're to look at 2002, there are a lot of promises. We'll give you jobs, of course, free primary education, but everything comes at a cost. How then do we afford these proposals from, whether it's from the Raila Odinga side or from the DP Ruto side, how do we afford this within the structure of the economy that we have at the moment?
It's challenging. I think we are in that time again, and I agree with Honorable Mbui here, that we're in that crazy time again, where every other politician is giving all manner of promises, because when you look at the country that we are having now, where we are debt-ridden, and then we are promising that we are going to be giving people 6,000 shillings every unemployed youth every month. I don't know whether it's monthly or it's yearly, but I think it's really crazy. I have also seen another promise that we respect the freedom fighters, and you can see the photo on the first page of Standard newspaper, where Raila Odinga had gone to meet Mukami Kimathi for a blessing, in total disregard of the fact that in Mount Kenya, for example, women don't bless. It is men who bless. In fact, even if you needed a blessing, you need to go to your father. It's your father who can bless you, not a woman. And again,
so are those blessings invalid?
I mean, if you look at our lady here, Mukami Kimathi, she is being aided. Even her hand is being held because she's unwell. She's ill. So she can't actually be able to decide.
What's the problem with that?
You know, don't subject this lady to these theatrics and you know, this is just for perceptions. It's just for optics. And can you see, the lady can't even talk herself. I'm sure she did not even pray because she can't even be able to talk. Her hand is actually being supported to bless. So, but what I'm saying is this, that we are in that time again where you're promising freedom fighters that you recognize them, that you're going to address their plight, and yet all this time, this has not been done. So I think Kenyans need to be a bit more wary of the promises that are being done now, so that they can also be able to put it on the weighing scales, so that we don't take everything in. Otherwise, people might end up being very frustrated after this.
Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, I want you to have the final word on this, because your party leader has promised 6,000 shillings per household that is unemployed. We have about 12 million households in this country. If I just make an estimate of about 1 million households that may be out of work, that would give you 6 billion shillings every month. In a year, that is 72 billion shillings. How does ODM leader Raila Odinga plan to achieve that 72 billion shillings every year, given the structure of the economy that you know, even how the expenditure is structured in this country?
Sam, first allow me to say something that you have been stopping me from saying all this time, and I don't foresee you giving me time. That let me correct my colleague who said that Raila Amolo Odinga is being sponsored by government facilities. We in ODM, we know how we are raising the money, or Raila himself is capable of hiring toppers. That one needs to go on record. Coming back to your question, allow me now to talk as a woman representative of this country. And this is so fundamental and important. When we are talking about another time when we are making promises, yes, promises must be made because every person who wants to be a leader has some dream of what is supposed to be done and how best, even the us who are talking here, if I'm told like you recognize this saying that I want to be the governor of Migori County, if you told me to say why, I would give you dreams. And so when we are talking about devolved governance, which we have all embraced, and two of my leaders today, one is a speaker of a county assembly, the other one was a former deputy governor. We have embraced this, and what is the idea and why did we go this way? There was a time that everybody in the village was scratching the soil, the land that I've had somebody talking about, and get some little money, take to the market, some VRC, take to the market, they are taxed 20 shillings, 60, 100, and then that money comes to Central Kitty here. Once it is here, it is stuck at the top, it never goes back to help these people produce more. And this is where the idea of devolving resources, especially the money resource, came about. So I want to give you an example.
No, Dr. Pamela, Dr. Pamela, we're running out of time. No, Dr. Pamela, we're running out of time. Just hold on.
Let me just come to this point, Sam, please.
The question I'm asking is about... No, Dr. Pamela, we have to conclude this. If you have to afford 72 billion shillings from a budget of 3.6 trillion shillings, where 1 trillion shillings goes to public debt...
This is what I want to say, Sam.
Yes, respond quickly.
When we look at those figures, they look so big because we are talking about the totals. But all those mamambogas we are talking about, some of them actually start their businesses like I did when I was at the university with 45 shillings. Some of them start at 100. Some of them start at 100, 1,000. And so when Raila says that we can give this youth even just 6,000 to start off something, what we are talking about is a situation where, yes, we have the land, we have the labor, we have the skill, but we don't have the startup capital. So I have done this in the county by giving these women groups and even individuals some little money to start up something, and I've seen them grow. Coupled with training and constant capacity building, it can work. That money is big, but given to a youth that is already capacity built, they can make sense out of it.
All right, Dr. Pamela. Dr. Pamela, I hear you.
And not the impact of that 6,000. It is possible because Kenya has got that trillion. If we can use this to capacity build our people and give them the chance to start those cottage industries, those small businesses, then they will grow. And that's why devolution has solved the problem that somebody is claiming to be talking about bottom up. There is no bottom up.
Dr. Pamela, Dr. Pamela Odhiambo, I think we have to end it at that point. I think we have to conclude it at that point. I still don't have an answer to my question. I asked you about how the country would afford 72 billion shillings to be given to people that are unemployed. I still don't have an answer. Let's take a look at the feedback quickly on Twitter. Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag is Daybreak. Engineer Lazaro, some of the great African degree holders ruled their countries with iron fists, messing up the economy. Degree papers minus wisdom is equal to nothing. Wisdom is what can define the type of leader needed. Odongo Rolex, good news. We were really waiting for this judgment. Now MCAs and MPs are free. Leaders are chosen by God, not by academic qualifications. Ogara, you say academic qualifications is not required to vie for any elective seat in the US. Mother of democracy. President Donald Trump doesn't have a university degree. Is that correct? Why are we so obsessed with degrees?
That's not correct.
I'm not sure that is correct. Abdallah Dambo, yes, education is very important and some leaders should have degrees. How many leaders have fake degrees and their leadership is better than who got original degrees? Cyprian Kamboni, next time bring people with no degrees for debate in the studio, please. Wow, it's not a qualification that you need a degree to participate in this conversation. But we hear you. Thank you so much, DG Jonathan Mweke, Speaker John Kagushia, Honorable Robert Mbui, and Dr. Pamela Odhiambo for making time for us. Up next is Sportive Monday. They'll be here to talk about the action, including why Liverpool is at the top. Chelsea survived by luck. Man City is still doing very well. Bye for now. My name is Sam Gito. We'll see you some other time.